Hello, everyone. I'm Anthony Argiropoulos. I'm an attorney here at Epstein Becker Green. I'm a litigator, and I am the co-chair of the firm's National Litigation Steering Committee. I'm based out of the Princeton office. Today, we are kicking off Epstein Becker Green's newest podcast, Speaking of Litigation. This podcast is going to focus on real-world situations and bring stories and information to our listeners from a sort of inside baseball and behind the scenes perspective. We're going to look at relevant topics. We're going to look at high stakes situations. We're going to look at things that are important to you. They're going to help you. Here with me today are Ken Kelly and Jim Flynn. Ken Kelly is the co-chair of our National Litigation Steering Committee. If you know Star Wars, then you know that there are always two. And Ken and I are the two. Additionally, we have Jim Flynn, who is our law firm's managing director. Jim is both a terrific attorney and a well-noted commentator and author, and he's going to have a lot to bring to this as well. So thank you, Ken, and thank you, Jim, for joining today.
Thanks for having us, Anthony.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. What we tried to do is figure out that there are two types of people in the world. One type are the people who know what litigation is all about because that's what they do. Or that's what they're exposed to. For example, we have in-house counsel. We have people who work for insurance companies. I think every HR executive in the country is an amateur lawyer based on the law that covers personnel law. People who work in the entertainment industry sometimes have litigation all over the place. We have those types of people. And then we have the other type of people, which is the vast majority, who get their litigation background and information from movies such as Erin Brockovich or A Few Good Men, or even My Cousin Vinny. My Cousin Vinny is pretty similar to some of the cases we've had, as a matter of fact. What we tried to do is put together a series of programs that address both of these people at the same time, to give some insight for the litigation professionals and for the litigation clients. How litigation works, what is pretrial discovery, something that you never see in the movies, what is the juror's eye view of a trial, because we've been on both sides of the fence on that. So what we intend to do is to entertain at the same time to enlighten people about how litigation works from our point of view.
Before we get started, a request for you, our listeners and viewers. If you like the information that we're sharing today, please subscribe to the show. And the show is Speaking of Litigation. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. So Ken, turning to you first, tell us how you see this podcast helping our listeners prepare for real life situations.
You have to understand that most people don't know how litigation works. You see a trial in the courtroom on television, but you don't realize that there may be years of preparation for that. Exchange of documents, taking depositions, all of which has a very important impact, essential impact on the trial itself. So what we want to do is to give people a little bit of a background as to how to get ready for a lawsuit, as well as how to conduct themselves during a lawsuit.
I think that's going to be a very interesting aspect, kind of pulling the curtain and talking about things like strategy, marrying strategy and tactics, and really how things work, from the inside. That's part of the inside baseball aspect that I think is going to be very, very interesting to our listeners. Jim, what do you think are some of the key areas of litigation that we're going to be covering in our first season of Speaking of Litigation?
So look, I agree with you and Ken. We want to pull back the curtain. We want to use examples and good stories, but do it without being a tribute band version of Glory Days. Right? So that's one end of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum, we want people to understand, what we're doing, but not make it so dry that it's like instructions on assembling a bike. So what kind of things are we looking to do? We have a great first episode that we call the new playbook for depositions, because of all the changes that have come about in terms of technology, how technology is used in the deposition, the concept of Zoom or Teams, remote depositions, and just the way that, we do things. We have another episode planned on artificial intelligence, where we're going to look at its impact in litigation, how legal content is generated, but also the underlying issues that come up under copyright law or the right of publicity and many other aspects of that. So those are just two. Do we have others? Sure. Ken's mentioned some things. We're going to look at unique evidence issues. We're going to look at unconventional evidence. There's a big trend on using Slack and social media and other things of that nature. And then we're going to get into the strategy things that you mentioned, Anthony. When's the right time to race to the courthouse? When should you slow down? What's the right way of figuring out when to settle and when not to settle, when to offer to settle, when to start the conversation. So we're going to look at that from, as you said, an inside baseball perspective, and try to get people an understanding of what we're doing.
I'll tell you, I'm especially interested in hearing about, the take on, current topics like, artificial intelligence, which we hear about. I hear about it every day now. We deal with it in litigation. I look forward to hearing about that. And, having had a little bit of a glimpse ahead of what's coming, I go back to my favorite high school teacher and my favorite college and law school professors. And the reason that they are my favorites is because they entertained me and I learned something. And sometimes I didn't realize what I was learning because I was entertained. So I'm looking forward to hearing from this, this cast of great storytellers that we have. I think it's going to be great. I am subscribing to Speaking of Litigation for sure.
Yeah, I think your point about storytelling is interesting and informative. When you do a jury trial, you get up in front of the jury and you do your opening statement, and it's a story. You have to tell a story, and that's what we're good at. But when lawyers tell stories about themselves, it's called war stories. And all of us have war stories exemplifying some of the things you talked about, such as using artificial intelligence in the courtroom, actually using DNA proof in a case, which I did once. So I think getting everybody's personal experiences, and we have a vast group of people who are around the country who have got all kinds of experience in all kinds of litigation, will really entertain and enlighten the group of people that we're aiming to have this program see.
And I would add that I think the storytelling idea is great, but what I love about this podcast is it's not just audio, that it's visual as well, because the stories that trial lawyers tell through witnesses and argument and other things often have to be visual as well. And I think that's an important aspect of what we'll see, because it really is the staging of a full production. It's not just what the script says, but it's where you're going to stand. What's the angle that the jury's going to look at something from? Where are you going to confront the witness from? How do you own the space of the courtroom? And so the visual aspects of storytelling are often just as important as the oral aspects of storytelling. We're going to examine all those things as we look through how to actually try cases.
Well, there you go. I've learned something and I've been entertained already. Thank you very much to our listeners and viewers. We are looking forward to a great first season of Speaking of Litigation. Hopefully we'll be picked up for a second season and so on, but you never know in the world of entertainment. Please subscribe to Speaking of Litigation, again, wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube or at speakingoflitigation.com. Thanks, everybody.
This podcast is presented by Epstein Becker Green, PC. All rights are reserved. This audio recording includes information about legal issues and legal developments. Such materials are for informational purposes only and may not reflect the most current legal developments. These informational materials are not intended and should not be taken as legal advice on any particular set of facts or circumstances, and these materials are not a substitute for the advice of competent counsel. The content reflects the personal views and opinions of the participants. No attorney-client relationship has been created by this audio recording. This audio recording may be considered attorney advertising in some jurisdictions under the applicable law and ethical rules. The determination of the need for legal services and the choice of a lawyer are extremely important decisions and should not be based solely upon advertisements or self-proclaimed expertise. No representation is made that the quality of legal services to be performed is greater than the quality of legal services performed by other lawyers.